What's up, friends, and welcome back to the show. Today I spoke to the very radical Trenten Merrill. He's a 3 times Paralympian athlete. After losing his leg at 14 years old, learn all about his journey back to high-level competition and the Paralympics. Learn about the craziest thing he ever saw in the Olympic Village, what it's like to compete under the lights in the stadium with all eyes on you, 4 years of training, a decade of experience leading up to this one moment to nail your jump, how an animal-based journey is helping him perform and recover at the highest level, the importance of mindset in overcoming adversity, and so much more. What a fascinating and inspiring dude. You're going to love this one. Let's get into the show with Trenton. Trenton, tell me what it's like to hear the words, "You're going to lose your leg."
Oh man, probably devastation. First of all, like hearing the word lose in general, like I didn't know what you were going to say next, but hearing the word lose in general is not a good feeling. Um, so yeah, initial feelings are bad. Losing leg, man, just thinking about like what I experienced when I was 14, it was like my whole world was upside down. So yeah, similar feelings to that.
Yeah, dude. I know your whole journey since has been pretty remarkable, and we're going to get into that today. Perspective shifting, reframing. I know you talk about that a lot, but yeah, putting yourself back in those moments. I'm an athlete myself. I prioritize my body a lot, and I just tried to put myself in those shoes, being like, "Oh shit! Like, what do you do with something like that?" So, tell me the story a little bit. How did that come about? And then we'll start to build how you became a Paralympic athlete after that.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Orange County, California, in San Juan Capistrano, and ever since I was a kid, I had a dream of becoming a professional athlete. And I was good at a lot of sports. And in my freshman year in high school, I was focusing on soccer and motocross. Those are my two main sports. And during spring break, my best friend and I were riding on his little dirt bike, and we had gone to my house to fix mine. We forgot a specific tool, so we decided to go back to his house. And as we're going back to his house, I remember his mom calling me on the phone, telling me she left the back door open. She's just going to the grocery store real quick, and she'll be right back. I was like, all right, bet. And so we were going on a bike path, which was separate from the street. And it was closer to the horse stables, where it's all creek and horse stables on one side, houses on the other. We're going down this bike path. We come to his street, Paseo Cristina. We look both ways. We don't see any cars coming. We start crossing, and there's a center median filled with bushes and trees that came down, created a wall. We're on this little dirt bike. This 16-year-old girl is driving this BMW. She doesn't see us. We don't see her because the bushes are taller than her car. We start crossing. Right as we pass the median, boom, I just remember seeing like the flash of a white BMW bumper right up on me. And then I woke up on the side of the road. I thought it was a crazy dream. And I looked over to my left, and I see my friend screaming. And I realized that it wasn't a dream, that this just happened. I look over to my right. I see the girl crying. She's talking to a police officer. So I reached down in my pocket, called my dad, told him what happened, told him I need to come to Scout's house, and then woke up in and out of consciousness, and then in the hospital, and spent 2 months in the hospital,
Dang.
where they eventually amputated my right foot.
Dude, that's wild. In that moment, sitting with that probably intense pain, in and out of consciousness, like you said, pain meds and all of that stuff. Did you think athletics was done at that point? Were you always a positive guy? Were you always like, I'm going to get back? What was the headspace like?
Great question. So, oddly enough, I was pretty positive. I didn't even think about amputation. It didn't even cross my mind. I'd only seen like a very few amount of amputees in my lifetime leading up to this point. And I remember at that time too, I was like growing in my faith as a Christian, and I had just started reading my Bible and learning about Jesus. And there was just this feeling personally that I was like taken care of. And so I like didn't have like fear crossing my mind.
Hmm.
It was something like, all right, I'm just chilling here and this is temporary. And I just kept seeing myself with a green cast and having all my friends sign it. So that was initially my thoughts and experience.
Something I've spoken to a lot of remarkable people. You know, that's the whole purpose of the show, right? Radical health radio, radical humans doing cool shit. And something I've come to learn from a lot of those people is when they've overcome the adversity on the other side of it, as much as they'd never wish it upon anybody else, there's almost a gratitude for it. It's kind of crazy for me to even ask this question, but is there a part of you now, like 15 years removed from this, that you're grateful that this happened?
For sure. So when you had asked me like how does it feel to hear like you're about to lose your leg, there was still like a small little voice in the back of my head like this is actually good for you.
Mm,
But I didn't want to bring it up initially because my initial feelings weren't that way, and it took me time to realize and understand this. And it was just a journey. It wasn't like something like snap and happened, but it was a process of mending and accepting this is who I am, and it's okay, and that this doesn't need to limit or define me, and instead I can push boundaries to see what is possible. And I still was very competitive, so it like for me, I I just kind of like chose to look at like I have an awesome opportunity to become one of those athletes and
hmm
people that inspire and motivate millions if I choose to. And I decided in high school that I want to be that guy that, despite having now a prosthetic leg, is still an incredible athlete. And so I decided that I was going to focus all my thoughts and efforts on being the best athlete possible and working really hard.
And that's so empowering, man. The fact that you use the word chose as well, very particularly, I have to choose to look at this in a more positive light. I think something I talk about a lot because I'm trying to help people shake off the victimhood and voluntarily give it up to choose
Yeah,
something like victor consciousness. But it's easier said than done, you know, when you've actually got something as traumatic as that, I imagine. Was that something like how long did it take for you to really accept it, like you said? And what was crucial to that? Like the thoughts in the mind and reframing constantly. And what did you really lean on? I know you mentioned faith. Tell me a little bit more about what got you through that very difficult period and turned it into a career afterwards.
totally. There's a few like scenarios that come up. And the first one was when I was in the hospital. So I find out I'm about to lose my leg. And like the doctor comes in, he performs a test on my foot, and he looks at my mom and he says, "Hey Denise, can I talk to you outside real quick?" And I was like, "This doesn't sound good." And I didn't have any feeling in my foot or toes at that point. I couldn't move my toes. And so
Mm,
then I'm looking at this doctor talking to my mom outside the hospital, and I see through the little window my mom just start crying. I'm like, "Uh-oh, this is not going to be good." And that's when I realized that they're going to come back in and tell me that we got to amputate your foot. So now I'm like, oh man, all these thoughts are going through my head, all these insecurities, and it's overwhelming. I start crying because I'm like, dude, what is my future? I have no idea what I can and can't do. And then my friend's mom comes in and she starts praying over me. And while she was praying over me, this incredible feeling happened where I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, just like kind of like shower me. And it was like I just stopped crying like that. And then I heard this still small whisper that said, "I got great plans for you." And then I just remember having this like internal dialogue conversation with God where I was like, if you say so, then I believe you because I
mm,
have nothing and I need some type of hope. I need something. So the doctor came back in and he was like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Let's go ahead and amputate it." And so we did. And then moving forward, it wasn't just like off to the
yeah.
races and get going, because now I'm going, or I had 3 months to get my first prosthetic, and then I returned back to school my sophomore year. And then throughout high school there was a lot of insecurities that were coming in. And um, I remember though, like before I went back to high school and before I left the hospital, this Marine came in and I had like a few weeks now. There had been time, like I remember the doctor came back in and he was like, "Hey Trent, do you have any questions?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, can I still run? Can I still ride motorcycles? Like, what can I do?" He's like, "Man, I don't know, Trenton." And I was like, "Bro, like what? Like, come on, this can't be like your first amputation experience. Like, you got to know something. Like, you're a doctor." And he was just like, "I don't know." And I was like, man, gosh, dude. And I'm 14 years old, so this is a really tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But a few weeks later, the guy that was like starting to come in and help me with like getting ready for a prosthetic, he had asked one of his patients to come in and speak to me. And just one day I'm chilling in the hospital bed, and this big buff dude walks in with a pretty looking girl, and he introduces himself as David, and he was saying that he was like, "How you doing, man?" I was like, "Dude, I mean, I'm all right, but like, I got some questions." He's like, "All right," and he had a prosthetic too,
Hmm.
and so I was like, "All right, like this is already a good start. Like he's buff, he's got a prosthetic, like this is cool. Looks like a badass dude." And he's like, "Hey, yeah, I'm a Marine, and I lost my foot on a motorcycle too." And I was like, "Well, dude, can you still ride motorcycles? Can you still run?" And like, he's like, "Yeah, Trenton, I still ride motorcycles, so can you." He's like, "I can still run. I re-enlisted and I run every morning with my platoon on the beach." And I was like,
Wow.
"Let's go." I was like, "Well, what about dating girls? Like, do you still date girls? Like, what's the deal with that?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude, this is my girlfriend." And I was like, "All right, let's go." And so that was pivotal for me because it only took one guy
Mm.
to change my life. And so after that day, I realized that if I work hard enough, and if God blesses me enough to have a platform to help others, then I have to return that favor of giving hope, because I had lost hope and just took one person to give me that hope.
Right on.
So that was a pivotal moment. And I think those two are probably, yeah, one of the biggest things that I kind of lean on.
Yeah, it's so good, man. And you're dead on too. We need somewhat of like inspiration or a permission slip sometimes from somebody in the world to like,
Yeah.
okay, if he can do it, I can do it too. And now it's all right saying that with a bit of distance as well, but trying to just put yourself back in the shoes of you were 14, man. Like you were
Yeah.
14, we're figuring out a lot of stuff. It's funny you mentioned the girl thing, but at least now you're like, hey, if nothing else, it'll be a conversation starter, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so
No, it
wild.
was. It was. And the cool thing was like going back into high school, and the more comfortable I got, like really just being around my friends, because when you're around your friends, you can't help but just be yourself.
Yeah.
And we were all really competitive and played sports. So just getting back into sports because I still had a competitive heart. And then realizing that, man, despite having a prosthetic, I'm still more athletic than a lot of other kids. And so if
Hmm.
I work really hard, I can be really good. And then it was just like, then there was girls that were like talking to my friends about me because they were interested in me. I'm like, all right, there's girls out there that do not care that I have a prosthetic, so this is dope. And so it's like little things in process of just like just being me and pursuing like my dreams, my passions, my skills, and what I want to be really good at. It was like all these other things kind of took care of themselves.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. So talk to me about how the timeline evolved from there. You know, you're back, you're at high school. Was the Paralympics even ever a thought? Like, how did that journey occur, and what happened after that?
Dude, I didn't even know about Paralympics until I got into community college. So throughout high school, I started competing. I went back to racing motocross, and then I started getting into wrestling and like jujitsu, and that was really, really fun. And then I graduated from high school, and I'm like, man, like I don't know what to do anymore. Like I'm not good enough to wrestle for any college
Mm,
teams. So during that time, I was like, uh, just having fun with my friends and lifting weights, and man, living life in Orange County, going to the beach almost every day, working at a bagel shack, and just working out. And then I remember one day the guy that was making my prosthetics, he's like, Trenton, I want you to come to this running clinic in Irvine. And it's a Challenge Athletes Foundation running clinic. Also, OSER, the prosthetic company, they put this on as well with them. They team up together. I was like, nah, I don't want to go. Like, I already know how to run. And he's like, come on, like, please go for me. And he kept asking me. And finally I said, okay, fine, I'll go. And so I go, and I show up there, and like the reason why I didn't want to go because I thought it was gonna be something like physical therapy where like kids were
mm,
just learning how to walk, and I didn't want that because I knew that I was already past that. If I was gonna go, I wanted to really be challenged and see what was possible, or be coached to the next level. And they immediately put me in a group where there was like kids like just got an amputation and they're just learning to walk. And I was like, dang, dude, like this is my nightmare. Like this is not what I wanted to do. And this coach sees me. He comes up to me and he's like, hey, Trenton, or he introduced himself as Coach Cruz from Olympic Training Center. And he's the head Paralympic coach. And he's like, why don't you come over to the elite running group with me? I was like, all right. And so I go over there and then I meet two Paralympians and they put me through a workout and they essentially were like, dude, have you ever thought about competing or trying out for the Paralympic team? And I was like, dude, what's Paralympics? And they're like, well, you compete against guys with your same disability and you get to travel around the world. You compete for your country, you get paid to do it. I was like, no way, dude. Like, sounds too good to be true. And they're like, yeah, like, dude, check it out. So coach gave me his card. I went home and I was like, nah, dude, too good to be true. And just was living life. And then about a month had gone by, but I kept feeling drawn to this card and I like just kept it on my nightstand for some reason. And I just remember this one day, I felt like an overwhelming gravitational pull to this card. And I go pick up the card and I like say to myself, like, all right, dude, if this coach doesn't answer, then I'm not going to call him back. And I call him, he picks up the phone and he's like, oh, Trenton, like, I've been waiting to talk to you. I want you to come down to the Olympic Training Center and I want you to come down here for a development camp next month. Spend 1 week down here. I was like, all right, I'll do it. So then that next month, I go down to San Diego and Chula Vista and I park my car at this Olympic Training Center. And I'm like, whoa, this is pretty sick. And I start walking and all of a sudden I get this overwhelming peace come over me and this still small voice that said, I got great plans for you. And I was like, whoa. And then I had a vision of the hospital of having that same conversation with God. And I was like, no way, dude. Is this like my destiny? And so then I walk down the track after I check in and I see all these like Olympians and Paralympians training down there. And I'm like, whoa, dude, like this was my dream. And so then I go back to my room, I eat and stuff. And I remember that night, I'm like, dude, you got to do whatever it takes to make this team. And so that night I just started doing stadiums and like had my headphones in and I'm like yelling at myself, like, you're the champ, you belong here. And like just speaking over myself. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do whatever it takes, man. So then I finished the week off and I didn't even have a running leg or anything. Other kids had running legs. So I was like, all right, I got to get one of those. So I get one. And then I go back to my community college at Saddleback Community College and I walk up to the coach, Mark Blethen. I introduce myself. And I'm like, hey, my name's Trenten Merrill and I have dreams of making the U.S. Paralympic team. Can I train and compete with your track and field team? And he's like, dude, I would love to coach you. I'd love to help you. Anything you need. Absolutely. And so I was like, all right, dude, do not let this coach down. Cause I already know that these other kids that are coming in here, they've been doing track and field for like all high school and stuff. I'm at a clear disadvantage. Just make sure that you work extremely hard and you're not like a pain in his ass. And so then it was like, get to work. And it took me another 5 years on top of that to make my first team. But yeah. That's how I got introduced to it.
Yeah, I'm very curious, when somebody's ascended the pinnacle of their sport and competed on the world stage, there is a little something different inside of them, from a mindset that separates, the casual gym goer from the professional and the professional from the elite athlete. Throughout that process, was there any doubt in your mind that it wasn't going to work, or was it so like destiny driven for you that it was just a matter of putting in the work? And what is required for that Olympian mindset? What sets you apart from the rest of the normal people like myself who perform pretty good but aren't necessarily at the pinnacle of the sport? What's required to be an Olympian and compete at that level?
Definitely mental fortitude. So there's a few questions in there. Like, did I ever have doubt? There was definitely times when I was like, what the heck, dude? Like every time I'm getting a little bit better, so is my competition that's already up here. And there was still something inside of me that believed down in my core that this was my destiny because of my experience in the hospital and then my experience of like first getting to the Olympic Training Center. And so I just kept telling myself like, dude, or my dad was like encouraging me. He's like, Trenton, just time on the saddle, dude. Just like learning how to ride a horse. Like you just need more time on the saddle. Like don't get discouraged. And so like year after year, I was like technically failing to make the team, but I was still progressing.
Mm,
And so I just kept like, even though it was very heartbreaking to like go to trials and go to nationals and lose, like not make the team and sit in a room and hear everybody else's name called except for yours, it was very discouraging. But like I would go through the little bit of like mourning process, and then I would flip the switch and just say like, you're going to work harder this year and you're going to work smarter this year, whatever that means. And then I became better and better at reflecting and reevaluating the training that I did over the year and the coaching that I had. And I always wanted to level up. So
mm,
if I needed better coaching, if I needed better training, I was willing to go seek that out and ask around. And that just became the process of leading to my success. But during that time, there was a lot of like, like ups and then downs. And for me, as long as I was progressing, I felt like, dude, you can't give up because you're
yeah.
still getting better. It may take you a little bit longer than other people, but you're still getting better. Now, if I wasn't getting better, one of the things that I was willing to look at is like, okay, do I need to change coaching and environment then? Like what things can I change to help me? And I would go do that. And then I would boom, get better. And then boom, get better. And so it was just a consistent process of a deep belief inside and embracing the losses as opportunities to reevaluate, learn, and then improve upon. And I just repeated that cycle and eventually led to making the team.
Huge, man. When you're looking for all of those little nooks and crannies to find a competitive edge, I know now you're very clued in about diet stuff and lifestyle. I was looking at your story yesterday. You had a big old steak and some raw bone marrow on there. I was like, yeah, my man knows. I saw the cabinet full of heart and soil. When did that come into your awareness, though? Because I remember being 14, 16 years old and still being very passionate about athletics. But, when you're young, you can pretty much eat whatever you want and get away with it. But then you've got to take it to the next level. You start looking at all of these areas, right? When did nutrition and recovery and those kinds of things come into your awareness?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents were all always pretty healthy. Now, don't get me wrong. We live in Southern California. We do love Mexican food, so we'll like we'll go eat Mexican food and pizza like every once in a while, like growing up. But for the most part, my dad was always really fit, and I remember even as a kid, like he never ate dessert,
Mm,
even though I would eat it, and my mom loved it. She had a sweet tooth, so I think I got that from my mom. But my parents were a good example. So
nice.
like you're gonna eat what they make you, otherwise you're not eating that night. And so they always cooked for the most part, like 90% of the time, it was really healthy. It was pretty much like steak, potatoes, and broccoli. Like that
There you
was
go, man.
probably a staple. And when I was progressing and pursuing my sport, I remember like even in wrestling and stuff, like I wanted to get better so bad. I was willing to make sacrifices of like unhealthy food for really good, healthy food.
Mm,
But it was easy when you're living at home. It gets tougher when you go to college and you have to figure out this stuff on your own. And it was really for me, like, I remember having a conversation with one of my best friends, Scott. He's like on that same mindset of like very healthy stuff and willing to go to the extremes to be the best athlete he could be. And we would have these conversations of like, dude, what can we do that's in our control that would directly influence our performance?
hmm
And it was nutrition. And so we were like juicing a ton. We were eating a lot of like fish, chicken, meats, and it just became something that like I want this goal so bad that it was easy to do this, and I was driven by it. And I would like, even if I didn't see results right away, I was like placebo in my mind of like, I'd look up all the benefits and like, dude, look at all these gains I'm about to make. So if I made a juice that was really bad and like I'm about to throw up, I would like research it, like what are all the benefits? And I'm like, dude, I'm about to make some serious gains here. So throw it back. And then I remember like my coaches and stuff as I was progressing, like one of them was like, hey, you should start eating liver like once a week. I was like, really? He's like, oh yeah. I was like, all right, if you say so. And I had no idea how to make it or anything. And I remember the first time I did it, I ate like too much and I was like sick to my stomach, I think probably
Yeah.
because too much vitamin A. And I was like figuring it out. But I understood that if you want to be like a shredded animal in the wild, then you got to eat super clean. You got to eat super good. And so I started seeing benefits and gains doing that, and like really lean gains, you know? So there was times when I, like in the fall, like I would eat whatever I wanted and like bulk up. And then I would start getting really clean as I got closer to like competitions and stuff. And then it became something later that I started recognizing like, all right, I don't need to eat pizza and other things because it's still causing inflammatory markers. So how can I eat really good and a lot of it so I feel really full and still get these like gains? And it just became like a trial and error process to where then I started learning how to cook really healthy food and make it taste really good. And then I started learning about like I read a book for my dog, right? I got a German Shepherd and he's a puppy, and I was like, I'm gonna read a book on how to feed him. And it was all about the book was called Give Your Dog a Bone, and it was all about feeding your dog like a wolf. And so you give them raw bones because of the collagen, the bone marrow has all the minerals they need. And then you
Yeah.
give them raw food. You give them like raw meat and fish, chicken, and then you give them organs. And I was learning about all these benefits. I'm like, dude, I need to be doing this for myself. So it's kind of like reading
Yeah.
about how to take care of my dog inspired me to be a dog, you know? So then I was like, me and him are going to start eating the same. So we share liver together. We share bone marrow and stuff like that together.
I love it, dude. I love it. Yeah, it's so that's so on point, and it's kind of sad too that how much attention people will give to the pets, and they'll make sure that they walk them and exercise them and give them the best food, and then turn around and not treat themselves the same, you know. But if that light bulb goes off, where you're like, oh wait a minute, we are a form of animal, a very sophisticated one, and maybe we need to honor some of that lost ancient wisdom as well. Then it's another massive ceiling that many people can tap into. I had a few athletes on the show where they competed at unbelievably high level, professional in the different endeavors, but they were eating junk and crap, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden, like, they were, picking up niggly injuries or whatever it was, and then they found something like a more ancestrally appropriate diet, a more nutrient dense diet, an animal based diet, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, I feel like I've just gained 5 years of youth back, and my inflammation's gone down and my recovery is way up. So it's a huge thing, especially if there's young athletes and stuff listening to this right now. I know you can get away with it and you probably look good and you're lean and all of that stuff, but it's gonna give you so much more back in terms of your energy and recovery. And I really appreciate that frame that you had of what's in my control that we can optimize and that's going to take me further. And people are out there feeding themselves several times a day, every single day, and that's a huge source of untapped potential for a lot of people. So that's very cool, man.
Thank you.
So tell me then, you're going through all of this, you're learning, you're training, you're a professional. When do you first make it to the games, and what's that like?
2016 was my first games, and I was in Phoenix, Arizona, training with this track and field team called Altus, and with a coach. His name's Dan Paff. And I remember that we started to really focus on long jump, and I started getting breakthrough that year in long jump, and I hit the national standard uh, for the first time, the A standard. And so there's a B standard, the A standard. If you hit the B standard, you get on the national team, and you start getting paid some money. If you hit the A standard, you get paid a little bit more money, and you get a little bit more benefits. And that was the first time I hit the A standard, and I was like, no way, let's go. Like I'm
Mm,
back on the national team. Let's go. And I'm progressing. And then I started looking at like my world ranking. And I'm like, dude, I'm getting better and better. I'm like, this is crazy. Cause I had no idea, like when I first started track, like which event I'd be best at. And so I'm like super stoked. I'm learning a lot. There's like the amount of like learning potential is so much.
mm,
And I'm just having fun every day, journaling, meditating, visualizing. And I watched my Olympic teammates compete in Rio before I went out there for the Paralympics. And that was cool because then I got to see what the track looked like. I got to see the board, the sand, and I started visualizing more. And then I was out there and I just remember having this like really like just a great time, like just filled with thankfulness every day. And like the people that were working there, the staff that were working there were absolutely amazing. And for me, I was like, I'm going to connect with these people because I feel like I know how athletes are, and a lot of them are like deserving, like you're here for me kind of thing. And so
Mm,
I was like, I want to reverse it where I'm getting to know them and letting them know that like we wouldn't be able to do this without them. And you gain some fans doing that too. So it was super cool getting to meet the locals that were volunteering to work there. And then competition time, it was sick. It was like walking out like a gladiator into this big stadium,
yeah.
and you hear a crowd roaring. And I remember like I was super anxious and nervous on the way to the competition in the bus, and I was listening to the Mindful Athlete, an audiobook on that.
Mm,
And it helped me kind of like lock back in, and I was just reminding myself of all the training I've done. And I had told myself so many times what I was going to do and how I was going to act once I got there. So right when I stepped foot on the track, it was kind of like the subconscious mind just like remembered that all those reps that I'd done. So then I was just locked in. I didn't care about any of my competition. I didn't even look at the scoreboard really. It was tough sometimes, like because you're on the runway and you can see this big screen and the
yep.
camera's on you. So it's tough not to like look up and get distracted by that. But I did a really, really good job of just being locked in of like, dude, who cares about anybody else? Because if I have three good jumps, I'll make the finals and I'll get three more. Just stay locked in and disregard everybody else. And so I sat by myself. I stayed locked in, and I broke the American record uh, on like my second or third jump. And then I was like, dude, that was a pretty good jump. I just hit a personal best. So I was like, all right, let's keep going. And then I think two jumps later, I broke it again. And then I was like, come on, dude, I'm in fourth. Let's go. And my last jump, I think I was like, I try to run. I just didn't have my steps right. And I was trying to bring more speed down the runway.
Mm,
And so I think that I was like behind or something. But I walked with my head high, held high, because I knew that that was my debut and I just placed top 4 in the world, where before I wasn't even world ranked, like before this year. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to be back and I'm going to get on that podium. And it was an unreal experience.
yeah, that is so cool, man. How much? Because I know, like, obviously there's a science to competing at that level too. When you start to get to the games level, right? You're thinking the big competition is every 4 years, so there's tons of training, there's tons of improvement. You're peaking, you're in all of this stuff, but for that moment to then be the man in the arena, how much, like, to set the personal best, to break the American record, like, how much of a combination of all the preparation that you did, and then how much are you riding off the energy of the moment, the crowd, the eyes on you, the pressure? Like, does that really influence your ability to access like another gear altogether?
Yeah, it can. It can be distracting or it can help you.
I bet.
And so it's kind of tough to find, or it can be tough to find your lane. Like, where do you perform optimally? Because some athletes are like, no, I need the crowd, I need that excitement. Um, and it can provide you a lot of energy. And I've experienced like both sides
Yeah.
where I was like locked in, I didn't need it. I didn't care about it, didn't want it. And I did really good. Other times I was like getting the crowd going, getting the clap, and I was feeling it, and I was like control the energy and then go, and I did really good as well. Um, and it's almost like, all right, the biggest thing is like, dude, whatever like flow state you're naturally gravitating
Mm,
towards, don't try to force anything, just like allow it to happen. Um, that's just my experience. Uh, but it can absolutely like make or break you, or if you lean too much on like the crowd and the atmosphere, then if it's you're at a smaller competition but it's
right.
like technically a really big competition but there's not the crowd, like Tokyo during like COVID when they didn't have any crowd, if you're a person that needed that clap, needed the crowd, then you're more than likely going to struggle in that environment. So I think it's the best thing, advice I'd have for any athlete, and even talking to myself, is like be able to perform no matter what with the exterior environment, and understand how to do that, because then that's in your control, because you
Yeah.
can't control the exterior stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very empowering. And I'm not sure we've got too many Olympic athletes listening to the podcast. We've got some casual athletes, but I think that's sage advice for just life in general, too. Like you can, if you can get to that point where you are controlling the controllables and you're not so worried about the crowd, which otherwise might be the temperature outside or whether Susan's being rude to you at work, and you really focus on what you're in control of.
Susan, gosh.
They're always the same, aren't they? Those Susan. Sorry, Susan, we love you really. Yeah, you just take a lot more of that power back. And I think, as much as the physical endeavor itself is incredibly impressive, so much of that has to be what's going on between the ears, right? And what's in your chest. What
Yeah.
are some of the most pivotal things that you've come to learn about kind of the mental side of performance? Like when you are there on that start line waiting, let's say you've got one more jump to make it all count. How do you not get overwhelmed and buried by that?
That's a great question. I've experienced both.
Yeah, tell me.
um, I think the biggest thing for me when like how to not get caught up in that is, I mean, it still kind of goes again because there's times when like I can be in a flow state and I can be messing around having fun in a like practice, and I could be like, all right, this one, okay, like this is my last one. All right, let's go. You're about to see, I'm about to beat you right now, and then I go and do it. Whereas other times, like a lot of times in competition, it's not quite the same environment, and um, like it can, if you put the pressure on yourself, then absolutely it's gonna. I think it makes it a lot harder because you already
Mm,
have pressure. You have exterior pressure, you have internal pressure because you have a desire to win. So for me personally, the best thing I could do is see it, feel it, do it. Like, what did my
mm,
coach tell me? Okay, like just focus on that. Like, because if I focus on the process, if I focus on what he told me to do differently or whatever I need to do, and if I do it, that should create the outcome that I need to win or move up in the rankings or have a better jump. So I try to bring it into like what is in my control. Like, what did he tell me to do?
hmm
See it, feel it, do it. See it, like okay, I'm like visualizing it. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. And then if I can connect the feeling, I'm like, oh dude, I'm ready. Like I'm ready. I can do this. I know I can do this. And then you get excited because you're like, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. Whereas if I like, there's been a time out 2023 World Champs. I remember watching one of my buddies, Jared. He came over to long jump that year and he started competing. And on the last jump, he beat me by a centimeter, and I had one more jump. And I'm like, I'm watching it, and I'm watching him on the big screen. I'm on the runway, and I'm like, last one. I'm like, come on, let's go. Like I had visualized this like a couple times like before, so I'm like, okay, we know what this looks like and feels like. I was like, let's do it. But I was struggling that day to like get my rhythm, and I didn't do it. I fouled, and I still think it wasn't far enough to beat him on that jump. But I was like, oh man, that was that opportunity. That's the ones that you like really live
mm,
for and you want. And I was like, dang, dude, that was a really tough pill to swallow. But I'm like, dude, it's got to hurt enough to be a learning lesson. So we
yeah.
gotta make some changes so that next time, if this happens, like you're better equipped up here. Because if I like, I was also having some like coaching communication issues. My main coach wasn't
Mm,
there, and I wasn't understanding. So there's a lot of things like behind the scenes, but still, um, as an athlete, like if you've done a repetition over and over, then you have it in the library. But in order to pull it, you got to be very like in tune, like things got
yeah.
to be in a flow, like with your heart and mind to be able to be like, okay, these are the corrections I can feel and I know,
Yeah.
and go do it.
Yeah, it's wild, especially at that level, because, like you said, that it's a game of centimeters or maybe even millimeters at the highest level. If you're just like that fraction of a step off, then that could be the difference between a gold and not even being on the podium, which is just
Yeah,
so because it's all got to come together, right? And I can only imagine, yeah, you like 4 years of training for this Olympics and forget the decade and the adversity and all of the sacrifice for this moment right now. Like try and feel into that is really big, but also probably really bloody exciting as well. I'm sure some of those highs are some of the highest highs you've ever felt as well, right? You must get quite a buzz being out in front of the people and doing it at the highest level.
for sure, for sure. I think there's highs and lows because when you put all this pressure on yourself and you believe in yourself and you're like, dude, I know I can do this, and you believe it down to your core, and then you don't do it, that's a hard thing to be like, to walk away from, and you ponder and you think about it for a while.
Mm,
But at the same time, if I were to have a different perspective shift of, if you were to come to me in the hospital and be like, if you decide to go down this road, you'll become one of the best athletes in the world. But just know there's going to be times when you're fighting for that podium and you lose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want that? Are you willing to take the losses with all the other gains and experiences that come with it? And I would have said, heck yeah, bro. Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like, absolutely, bring it on. Let's go to war. Let's go fight these guys. Let's go to battle, and let's go train hard, and let's go get better. But when you're in the moment, it can be very tough to accept that because you did all this preparation, all these
Right.
sacrifices, invested your time, your money, and you're giving it your all, and you have other people watching you too,
Yeah.
and you have subconscious expectations of yourself from maybe what other people had said about you or to you, like, hey, you're gonna go do this, that, and then to not do it is tough. But
Yeah.
for sure, you get highs and lows, and it's just part of the game. And I think the better you can control that, the better off as an athlete you'll be.
Yeah. I like that perspective, man. It reminds me of a song from Chris Stapleton, one of the lines that is, nobody wins who's afraid of losing.
Mm-hmm.
Loss is the other side of the winning coin. You got to put it on the line. You've got to acknowledge that, hey, I don't just get to, maybe I was a stud athlete in high school, but when I get to those levels, there is a very real chance there that I lose and everything that comes with that, the disappointment and the shame. But that's the only way to win. It's the only way you can win is to put yourself in that test and see what you're made of. And again, I think that's not just for Olympic athletes or high level athletes. I think that's life. I
Yeah.
think that people need to go for the win. And the reason they don't go for the win, and by the way, a person's win might be having a hard conversation with the boss or jumping career or moving across the country. But if you don't go for your win because you're afraid of losing, then you are guaranteeing a loss
Yeah.
because you're not
Yeah.
going to do the thing that you need to do. So there's so much in that of just, there's just different levels and different arenas that we compete in, but we're all kind of doing the same thing. And you have to understand that most people that have accomplished anything great, success runs through a town called failure. There's going to be some losses, but you said something earlier, like transitioning from a loser's mindset to a learner's mindset. Okay, that was an L. What can we do? How
Yeah.
can we improve? Where's the tweaks? So
Yeah.
how are you still doing that now at this phase of your career?
Well, in Paris, for example, I tore my hamstring the day before I entered into the village because I was at a
Oh,
competition.
damn.
Yeah, and I thought it was just a cramp, and I didn't find out till like a week later in the village because we were trying to go back to practice after letting it rest and stuff, and it wasn't getting better. Like maybe minimal, but I was like, my coach was like, "Dude, let's get an ultrasound because this shouldn't be giving you any problems." And then we found out that I had a second degree tear in my hamstring, and I was like, or a second degree strain. And
Yikes.
I was like, okay, well, you know what? Miracles happen at the games. There's been athletes that were hurt and still were able to get medals or win. I'm like, maybe God wants to use me to be one of those guys. Like, this is my opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I was like, flip the switch. I also, like, don't get me wrong, like right when I heard that, I was like my heart sank, dude. And
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
like hard to control my emotions. I remember going back to my room after the ultrasound, just like all these stuff is going through my head, like all this preparation. I was jumping really good, and I was like ready to go get another medal. I was ready to go fight, and I want that. And I went back to my room. I remember like my friend just could tell, Hunter and Ezra. They were like, "Dude, are you good?" And I was like, I like try to like tell them like what was going on, and then like tears start coming out, and they're like, "Bro, oh my gosh, dude, like, well, listen, Trenton, like if anybody could do it, you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just making your story that much better. And you have the perfect team here with you. Like, who else would you want here?" And I was like, nobody, dude. And they're like, "Bro, you got your coach, you got your osteopath, like you have the perfect team." I was like, "You're right, dude." And they're like, "Bro, you're gonna do something amazing. Like, keep believing in yourself." And so I was like, "Let's go." So kind of like, again, just needed a quick, like needed some friends to be there for me and speak some encouragement into me. And then it was like, all right, bet I'm not gonna let this like take away from my experience of making this team. I earned the right to be here, and I'm still gonna go compete. And so then it became preparation and stuff like that. And I went out and competed, and I knew that I only had one jump, and I fouled that jump, and I didn't run, like I didn't replicate because I remember like in the warm-ups, I did a good run. And my coach was like, "Dude, you're running really good. Like we could do this. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah. He's like, if you want to take one more, you can. I was like, dude, I think I got to save it. So then we waited for 30 minutes. And then by the time it was time to compete, I remember the crowd's going and stuff. And I started getting hyped. And then I started forcing it. And my coach, the one thing he told me is like, don't force it, like relax, like let everything happen. And I didn't do that. And so I was like, man, that was my one opportunity, because they all told me like, you got one jump. And so then I was like, we got to go for another. And
Wow.
then we went for another and it popped.
Oy.
And I was like, oh, that hurt. And so I go over and he's like, are you okay? I was like, my hamstring popped. He's like, okay. He's like, Trent, we need to decide your future versus now, you know. I was like, I can do another one. And so he's like, okay, just go sit down, come back to me in 5 minutes. Let me think. And so he's like, all right, just do left leg pushes like we've done in practice before. I was like, okay, for sure. I know what that feels like. And I was trying to do it, but every time my right leg was cycling, it was hurting. And so my gait was like really off and I just couldn't pull it together. And I was like, oh, dude, it hurt so bad to jump and run. And so I didn't make finals. And I remember after that, like I'm talking to my coach and I'm like, okay, how could we improve? What could we do next time? Why did my hamstring strain? He's like, I think that we needed to do more max out sprinting before that competition to prepare you, because in the competition you're going to go to just subconsciously a little bit
Right.
higher level. So he's
Right.
like, I think I could have done a better job of having you just do a really fast sprint session and then rest and get ready for the comp. And I think that would have prepared you better. I was like, okay, all right. So that was part of the, learning process of what to do moving forward. Now, it's all about like rehabbing some injuries. So all this past year, I was dealing with like torn shoulder, ankle problems, starting to get a little bit of knee problems, and then hamstring. So right now it's about healing and recovering and get ready
Yeah.
for this next year, and then applying what we learned, like how we could get better from last year going into these next 4 years.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that healing conversation because I'm curious what you really lean into. But before we head into that chapter, I'm curious what it was actually like. The more recent one being Paris, because the layman we see what we see on the TV. We see like the opening ceremony is weird. They're doing satanic deeds,
Yeah.
like worship.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And then you see the cardboard beds, and they're saying like
Yeah.
they're just trying to de-incentivize people from hooking up, and then there's other
Bro, that's
rumors
not
that
going to
it's like,
stop them.
yeah. So what's it actually like in Olympic Village? Like, what's the craziest thing you've seen at the Olympic Village? What's that experience like?
Oh, craziest thing. Okay, craziest thing. In Tokyo, they had the automatic cars that would drive you around the village. So the village is really big, and it's a little village, and you have all these people like from around the world living there, and 80 to 90% of them have disabilities. So it's really cool because you're in this community where, dude, you're in an environment where if you don't have a disability, you stand out.
Right.
And every day I'm walking around, I'm like, whoa, that's a new one. I've never seen that before. And for the most part, like I would say 80 to 90%, if not more, of like disabled people have a sense of humor with their disability, and they're super open to it, and you can have fun with each other, make fun of each other, and there's great banter. So it's fun. But I would say one of the craziest things that happened was in Tokyo, the automatic car ran over a blind dude.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so there was a big thing. The cars were shut down for a while. And I was like, no way did that happen. That is not good.
That is
So that was
not
probably
good.
the craziest thing that has happened. Yeah, I think that's probably the craziest thing that
That's pretty wild. That's a pretty good
yeah.
one. Yeah. Were you on the back end of, I saw, because obviously I've been meat pilled, right? I'm trying to get people to eat meat. And I saw there was a big vegan slant to the Paris Games. They were trying to do like plant-based meals. And I saw some of the athletes early on kind of revolting against that. Like, yo, we're the best athletes in the world. I think we could do with some protein. Was that all done and dusted by the time you guys got there? What's the nutrition like? And what are you fed? Or are you in charge of your own stuff?
Honestly, I didn't even know about the vegan thing because I don't eat vegan food. Like, don't get me wrong, every once in a while, like if there's something that's like honey glazed barbecue tofu and I get a sweet tooth, I might like, well, dude, I'm gonna get a couple pieces of that. But that is by no means a staple or something that I'm trying to consume for my goals. So when I go in there, I'm immediately looking like, all right, where's the red meat? Where's some like salmon or tuna or something like that? Where's the eggs at? And I try to keep it as close as possible to what I'm normally eating. And the good thing is they have all these different stations of all these different like world ethnic foods. So wherever you're from, you can pretty much find something that you like, and they have the basics of like chicken, fish, uh,
That's pretty cool.
steaks, beef, yeah, eggs, and then they got a bunch of like cookies and sweets and pastries, but they got a
Awesome.
bunch of fruit. They got nuts. So really, if you want to eat bad, you can eat bad. If you want to eat good, you can good. And for a while there, they used to have McDonald's in the village too.
Wow.
They don't have it anymore. And like I think there's a like if you're trying to experiment, what I would suggest for an athlete, like do it earlier on, like so you can get it out of your way, or wait till after competition so you can look forward to that chocolate muffin at the village or something like that, you know? So
Yep.
that way you can embrace it and be like, dude, I earned it, whatever, like live a little. But for the most part, you can absolutely find what you want. They got a lot of coffee stations everywhere too. Now you're not going to get organs, you're not going to get liver,
No.
bone marrow, stuff like that. But it helps if you bring supplements, and uh, yeah, that's pretty much how I kind of navigated around the village, at least.
Cool. Yeah, and not everyone's Usain Bolt that's going to break world records eating just chicken nuggets. You know, to some some genetic freaks can just get away with it. Others, as mere mortals, we should probably be thinking about dialing in that nutrition if we want to be our best. What's nutrition look like for you these days? I know you've been kind of introduced to something like an animal-based lifestyle, but also you train a lot, and you've probably got a high demand for calories, high demand for carbohydrates as well to fuel that performance. What's like a typical day of eating look like?
Well, I train as a primarily as a sprinter, being a
Yeah.
long jumper. We need speed, and so it's very power based, power and speed, and force production. So my energy, like food demands from me, what I've been doing is like wake up in the morning. Like right now, I got like bone marrow with lemon and salt in there, and then I'll have coffee after I start sipping on that. And I usually try to drink like water with salt and lime in the morning. And my girlfriend got me this thing that Gary Brecka made with the hydrogen water.
Yeah,
So
right on.
I try to drink that first, and then I go to the ancestral blend
Yep.
of Force by Nature with the heart, liver, and either ground beef,
Yeah.
venison, or what is it, bison.
Yep.
So
That
I
stuff's
like
awesome.
that. I do a half of that, and then I do a quarter of just organic grass fed beef from Sprouts. So I have like 3/4 of ground beef of a pound, and it's pretty high protein intake. And then I usually either cook it in like tallow,
Hmm.
like that I make from my bone marrow, or I'm scooping out bone marrow and I'm throwing it on the bottom of the bowl. I put that on top, and then I eat that. And then I have berries. I don't eat raspberries because it's got like high nickel, and I have a nickel sensitivity.
Mm.
So I just berries like blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, raw kefir. I like it from the raw farms. They're super
Yeah, right
good. They
on.
got a vanilla flavor too. So if you got a
Yep.
little sweet tooth like me, add some cinnamon and maybe honey too.
Yum.
And then I go work out for about 2 to 4 hours on the track. And then I'll have a protein shake, apple, macadamia nuts, go lift weights for another 2 hours, head home. On my way home, protein shake, apple, macadamia nuts. And then when I get home, shower, clean up, ancestral blend, like same thing, exact same thing I had for
Yep.
breakfast, except now I'm adding colored potatoes,
Yeah.
and I'll have a salad as well. And so I have majority of my
Yum.
carbs at dinner, and so that gives me everything I need for glycogen restorage. So then the next day, like I'm good to go. And what I found was having like the high protein, high fat, and incorporating these organs in my diet is my muscle striation
Mm.
started becoming very evident. My skin was healing faster from sunburn, so I wasn't really getting sunburn
Hmm.
anymore. I was getting really tan naturally, and then I kept packing on like lean muscle mass, even though I was cooking in a lot of fat and I was consuming a lot of fat with the bone marrow. It was kind of like something like, okay, I know this is a lot, but let's just experiment and see what happens. And it was really like I was just getting more shredded, and I was staying healthy, and I had a lot of energy for workouts.
So
So
good, man.
yeah, that's pretty much like what I was eating almost every single day.
Yeah, my man Trenton's dialed. I love it, dude. Yeah, and I'm guessing, that's probably the best case for something that's so explosive like your sport, right? Is to be lean on the body fat, high muscle, high power output. So that's luck if you want to train and luck like an athlete. The animal-based diet holds the keys because you're pretty much, dialed in on the AB framework there. There's not much variance. And I think, it's the proper human diet for just general health, but also like a few tweaks and being extra diligent about replenishing those carbs and getting your protein numbers up. Like this works for athletics too at the highest level, which is pretty nifty. So that's cool, man. Yeah, man. I wanted to kind of just close with some of your thoughts on recovery. Like you said, nutrition's a big part of that. You've talked about the mental side of things, like reframing the challenges, like with the hamstring and with the shoulder. Now, practically speaking, as an athlete, what do you do to improve recovery? Are you doing anything crazy out of the box? Are you focusing on a lot of mobility? Are you doing red light therapy? Do you sauna, cold plunge? Like what's in your recovery toolkit?
Right. That's a great question. So for sure, mobility, the biggest thing, like for me, definitely like an off season. Cause once we get into like training, even in preseason, once I'm getting like programs from my coaches, it's like, dude, there's so much volume that I
Yeah.
can't really add some of the stuff that I feel like would be really beneficial, like functional range conditioning,
Yep. Yep.
even fascia stretches. Sometimes like those can take a toll, but it's finding the balance. So in the off season, what I'm really trying to work on is like some cars, like for hip mobility, like
Yeah.
doing the
Love that stuff.
FRC. Yeah, really good.
Very
And
good.
then Eldoa stretches for my spine because I have a herniated disc and I have some kyphosis as well. So I know
Mm,
that if I want like to have good posture, then I need to do some good fascia stretches to decompress my spine. And then also when you're doing these, like you're isometrically contracting your whole body. Like there's different like things, toes are pointed in, femur pointed out, hands up. And so I know that's going to help with posture because posture is really good for sprinting,
hmm.
jumping, even weight room stuff. So I try to do that like first thing in the morning, like knock it out because otherwise it's really tough, like mentally, just to push yourself to do it because these certain things like this is like a little bit time consuming. The Eldoa stretches are like maybe 6 to 10 minutes, but it's hard to do. So getting yourself to do something really hard later
Yep.
in the day is harder. Whereas like if you just knock it out first thing in the morning before you get the coffee, like earn the coffee, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I try and do. Cold shower to stimulate my like mind. I just came across a page that was talking about when you shock the body with cold, extreme colds, you get brain derived neurotropic
Yes,
factors.
indeed.
So I was like, I didn't even know that, but I did. Every time I take a cold shower, even if it was like sleep deprived, I felt like I just had a bunch of coffee. I'm like awake, alert. I'm ready to take on the day. So I like doing that to help wake me up, prepare me for the day. And I think that still kind of helps with the recovery process. But
Mm,
like, let's say off season or even during season, I definitely like to do red light therapy, stimulate the mitochondria. Ideally, if I could do it after a hyperbaric chamber, that would be awesome.
mm.
I do like saunas. I like saunas anytime like recovery, off days, or an off season, because for me personally, I remember listening to like Dr. Rhonda Patrick talking about like epinephrine storage, and I experienced like being able to really focus after. I also noticed that, or I know it's a great detox for heavy metals.
Yeah.
Um, Also, we consume a lot of plastic, so I feel like that might be help aiding in that, along with
Yeah.
like the raw foods and stuff, like the raw dairy. But sauna, doing Wim Hof method in there, I feel like oxygenates my blood and my muscles and helps the healing process. I think meditation, listening to like Joe Dispenza when I'm in the hyperbaric
Yeah.
chamber and just an hour of like being in a parasympathetic state helps heal your body. Listening to like, or going through a meditation process where I'm focused on certain body parts,
Mm.
I think that really helps rejuvenate and heal those body parts. I think that contrast is great. I don't love it, but I will do it. I will do it, especially if like, let's say I compete one day and I have a competition the next day. That night, I'm probably gonna do an ice bath. I might do a
Yeah.
contrast, but for sure at least some ice because I want to feel fresh the next day. So how can, even if I feel it, I'm gonna think a little bit differently. Versus if I'm sore, I might be thinking about it more and more. But I don't like to do that after workouts. I like to
Yeah.
have natural inflammatory response.
That's right.
I do like Epsom salt. I think Epsom salt is really, really good. I think that pretty much hits them all. Oh, I mean, dude, bone broth. I think bone broth is one of the greatest recovery tools personally. Like when I
Amen.
had really, really bad back pain, I was like, all right, consume parts of animals that are related to my back. So I was like,
Mm.
bones, okay, get some bones, some turkey necks, chicken necks, whatever, throw them in there, get some good collagen and try to have that as much as possible. So I really feel like that helps. Like nutrition for sure helps with recovery.
Yeah, I feel that, dude. I think almost nobody's eating enough connective tissue. I know you're on it with bone broth and the bone marrow, and just eating the chewy parts. Even ground beef is actually a really good and surprising source of collagen and connective tissue. But especially for athletes, if we're breaking our body
Yeah.
down and we're putting those demands and we're asking it to rebuild, like that energy of like for like you mentioned, this idea that, hey, if this is hurting, what are the things that are found in that, and maybe eating those? It's kind of a part of the lost ancestral wisdom of organs, right? Like we
Yeah.
see, at least when we look at hunter-gatherer cultures, there's this idea that, the elders might get the heart because the heart is what is weaker in them, or the liver will be given
Oh yeah.
to the infirm, the elderly, or the women that are trying to get pregnant because they know it's just a source of power. And, teasing the audience a little bit here, but we're going to be working on something this year that validates that science as well, that actually shows
Let's
that
go.
there's a lot more than just a woo-woo belief that is actually happening, and there is some old science that we've uncovered as well. So it's all coming out, man. But you're dead on. Your intuition led you down the right path there, because this energy of like for like stuff is very real, and the answer to rebuilding the body is in putting back in what nature's taken away, or what we eat, and all of that stuff. So I love that, man.
Yeah.
Your protocols sound super dialed, and it's really cool. I'm just kind of jealous. I want to come hang out for a day with you and do
Yeah.
all
Do
the
it.
things and get put through the ringer and see. I feel like a badass sometimes. I train 1 hour a day, and I'm like, okay, I think he's training for like 4 or 5 hours a day. Okay, we got some work to do, but here I am. I'm a stay at home dad and a podcast and non-Olympic athlete, so got to lower those expectations sometimes.
It's all right. If you ever want to come out and you want to do a whole day with me, that'd be super fun.
Heck yeah, man. Well, tell people about where they can go to keep up, because I love your content. It's really inspiring and uplifting, and it seems like you're leaning into a lot of cool content these days. So where can people go to keep up with you, and tell them anything about, what's exciting for you, or what's coming next, anything like that? The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. So Instagram for sure. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Going to be start posting a bunch of vlogs. Like all of last year, I filmed almost every single day of practice and competitions leading up to Paris and right after during the physical therapy of recovering from my hamstring. So that'll be a cool one to watch if you like watching vlogs and behind the scenes of athletes and what they go through, how everything is, even the team selection procedure and going to nationals and trials in the Paralympics. And then Instagram, Trenton TR3N10. TikTok's my first and last name, Trenton TRENTEN, Merrill MERRILL. Some things coming up this year. We have World Champs in New Delhi, India, and that'll be end of
That's cool.
September until I think October 8th. So right now, the process right now going through just rehabbing, having fun, eating healthy, creating content about stuff I'm doing, because I feel like one of the coolest things you can do as any person is share what you learn. Like go help other people. So that's the kind of stuff I'm having more fun creating. So we have a bunch of like new reels that are like already edited, ready to post. So I think the content's going to continue to get better and better, and more about like who I am, what I do day to day, what kind of lifts I'm doing, what kind of mobility stuff I'm doing. So I'm just having fun, living my life and trying to share it with other people and help them be the best athlete they can be.
I love it, man. It's very cool to watch, and you're definitely fitting of the moniker to be on Radical Health Radio. So stay radical, bro. Trenten Merrill, ladies and gentlemen, peace out, friends. We'll see you next week. Stay radical.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.